Well, thanks, Jesse. And I mean, I know everyone's immediately thinking, well, Kev, why are you in Media Composer? Well, that's actually kind of one thing that I think is going to be very cool. And you're going to start to realize very quickly about this webinar, whether you're a Media Composer editor, whether you're a Premiere editor, these days, when we think about finishing and we think about leaving our NLE to do finishing, we also think about handing our projects off to somebody else. And the one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to take your project, the way that you've laid everything out and the way that you're happy with things, and you hand it off to somebody. And when you end up getting it back, things don't look the way that you had them. And one thing that's great using the power of Boris FX's BCC and RED and even graffiti is that you can actually, inside of your nonlinear editing application, build these effects to then send over to Resolve, whether it's actual effects or in this case, we're going to be talking predominantly about titling. I'm not going to start out by talking about titling, but we're going to talk predominantly about titling. But you can get in and set up a lot of this stuff right inside your timeline so that when you send it over to Resolve, everything is going to appear exactly the way that you had it inside of your Media Composer or Premiere Pro timeline. And we're going to do that, a lot of that, using the power of presets, especially when it comes to BCC. When it comes to RED and even graffiti, we're not going to talk too much about graffiti, but when it comes to RED, we're going to be able to save our projects out of Media Composer or the RED plugin inside of Media Composer and basically open that using the RED plugin inside of Resolve to get everything exactly the way that we had it right here in our timeline. Now, what I want to do to start out is I want to show you a little bit of an example of just what I was talking about taking presets and sending them from your editing application over to Resolve. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a quick little composite with this shot here. We have our lady drinking some coffee or some tea, and we just need to give this sort of a different look, a much colder look, sort of maybe in a flashback scene. She's sort of looking right towards the camera, so we want to have this almost like a flashback. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into our effects palette here. Now, again, like I said, I'm in Media Composer, but the concept works the same if you're working in Premiere as far as the presets go. And what we're going to do is I'm going to come into Film Style, and I'm going to start out using a great new effect inside of BCC 9. I'm going to use two-strip color process. And what we're going to do is I'm going to start out much like I start out with Boris FX's BCC filters. One thing I love about them is the amount of presets. There's probably over 2,000 presets in this package. And I will just also mention that with BCC 9, we now also have the FX browser. Of course, the FX browser is a way to get in and actually get a visual look at any one of the presets you might want to use. But for me, I don't need that because I know what preset I'm going to use. I'm going to come into my presets, and I'm going to use Muted Color Cold. That's a very nice one to use here. Let me just zoom in here a little bit just so we can see that full frame. There we go. Looking much better. And let's just get in and let's just make some adjustments here. Let's bring our exposure. Actually, let's bring the brightness up a little bit. I'm just going to bring the exposure down a little bit. There we go. Just get a little bit of a crushed look. That's looking pretty good. Okay, now we actually want to create a multi-effect look here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stick inside the same category. Let me just come back to the effects palette here. And I'm going to take a grain effect. I'm just going to hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, just drag and drop it right onto the shot. Now, as soon as I drop it in there, you can see the grain appear. And I'm just going to add just a bunch more grain. Okay, let's just increase the amount. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that if I zoom in here, you can see there's the grain there, but it's a little bit not represented exactly the way that it should be. Let me just zoom back one step here because I'm not exactly in the best quality. So let me just switch over to best quality. There we go. That's a little bit better look at what this grain is going to look like. Okay, and we're just going to add one more thing because if we're having a flashback, nothing says that we're actually having a flashback situation like a glow effect. And I'm just going to take Film Glow, again, Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, just to drag and drop, because I'm just stacking these on top, and I don't need to affect any particular part of the sort of effects chain. I don't need to apply something to something else. I don't need to get in and worry about inside the effect itself, getting into the multi-start middle and end aspect, because I'm just applying this just to everything in general. And what we're going to do here is let's just... I don't want anything to be too crazy, okay? And just bring the radius down a little bit. We'll just adjust threshold. And this is kind of what I'm going for, okay? So this is a shot that we've created. And I know that's, throughout my whole show that we have a few different flashback situations. So when this gets to Resolve, I'm going to want the Resolve artist to basically be able to take this look. What we're going to do is create a power grade and be able to take this and apply it any time that he needs to, obviously on top of any shot that he might want to put it on or any shot that might require it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these presets and we're going to export them. So I'm going to step back into effects mode. Shift and Y is my shortcut for effects mode. And let's just minimize everything here. And let's go back to two-strip color. And all we're going to do is inside of the preset dropdown, I'm going to save this preset out, okay? Now, by default, it always wants to save the preset into the folder. You can see right now on my Mac, it's into Library, Application Support, Presets, Film Style, and Two-Strip Color. So then what would happen is it would appear in the menu here, and it would also appear inside of the FX browser. But I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I'm just going to save it onto the desktop because maybe the Resolve artist isn't working on this workstation. They're working on a different workstation. So what we're going to do is just save this out to the desktop here. So we're going to say save. We're going to go to the desktop. We got a folder called Power Grade. We'll just call this 1 2-strip. So I know it's the two-strip color process. And I also know that it's going to be first in the chain. Okay, so we're going to say save. Next, film grain. Exactly the same thing. Save. Back to the desktop, back to my folder. I'm going to call this 2 grain. Okay. And let's go to our glow. And again, exactly the same thing. So basically what I've done is without actually building the effect inside of Resolve, I've told the Resolve artist, call this glow. Now, what I would probably actually do, instead of calling it glow and grain, I would actually call it film glow, film grain, just so that the Resolve artist knows exactly the effect that I'm talking about. Because I'm obviously doing this myself, I know which effects I'm talking about. Now, you can see in here I've got now filter 1 is going to be two-strip color, filter 2 is going to be grain, filter 3 is going to be glow. So let's go into Resolve, and let me show you how this works. I'm just going to Command-Tab into Resolve, obviously Alt and Tab for my Windows friends. And here's the shot, okay? Again, exactly the way that we had it inside Media Composer. You can see very dark, okay? And let's get in and let's apply this look that we just created. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete that. I was sort of, jumping ahead a little bit here. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down, starting obviously in our film style category with the good old two-strip color process. So I'm going to take two-strip color, drag and drop. As soon as I do, you can see the effect has now been applied. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over here. Of course, again, much like I had inside of Media Composer, I do have the FX browser in here that I can get in and pick whichever shot or whichever preset that I might want to apply. But of course, we're not doing that because we already have a preset. So again, we're going to drop that down. I'm simply going to say load. We're going to come to the desktop, into my Power Grade folder. I'm going to take that two-strip color preset. I'm simply going to say open, and there it is. Very cool. Okay. Now I need to add a couple of outside nodes here. Okay. And let's apply the other effects. So with our second node here, what we want to do is we want to come into our film grain, which is right here. Okay. There we go. Again, exactly the same process we're going to load. So you can see how simple this works. I don't need to worry about the Resolve artist having to get in, tweak anything. And it also lets him focus on, or her, pardon me, him or her, focus on what's really important, which is actually getting in and grading my show. They don't have to worry about actually building these effects because I already got them approved in the offline inside my Media Composer or Premiere timeline. And last but certainly not least, Film Glow. There we go. Of course, it's going to blow that out a little bit here once it actually applies it. There we go. And let's come into my presets. Let's just load that again right back to the desktop. Now, what I should actually point out before I go on is that when I come to load, you're going to see that it wants to load the BCC Film Glow preset. And much like I showed you in Media Composer, I showed you where it saved it to. But what's important to keep in mind is that this is a completely different new set of presets. You can see that I have inside of application support, we're not going to the AVX version of these presets anymore. We're now going to the OFX version of these presets, which are the ones specifically for Resolve. That's why I saved them out onto the desktop here to keep them in one nice confined place. And what I basically now have built inside of Resolve, and of course, I explained this in about 5 minutes, but what I now have as it loads up here is I now have rebuilt that look that I had inside of Media Composer, inside of my Resolve timeline. Let me just switch back to my... Let's give it a second update here. There we go. Perfect. I now have rebuilt the look that I had inside of Media Composer, inside of Resolve super quick. And what's going to happen is that this is actually going to automatically render in the background. But I've now, like I said, basically rebuilt the look. I don't now have to think of anything. I don't have to worry about the Resolve guy having to get in and tweak anything. This is basically now all set and ready to go inside of Resolve. Okay. So let's move on and let's actually start talking about titling and how the titling is going to work, and transitioning things again over from Resolve or from Media Composer Premiere into Resolve. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide out of Resolve here for a second, and let's get back into Media Composer. There we go. And we can close this sequence. I'm just going to close that all together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into Lesson 2. And let's just create a look. And this is one look that I like to create all the time here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take this shot of tomatoes being chopped, and we're going to add some 3D text in over top of this. Okay. So I'm just going to drop this into a timeline. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a new video layer on top of that by simply hitting Command and Y on the Mac, Control and Y on Windows. And what we want to do is we're going to sort of create two looks. I'm going to create the extruded text look, and then, oh, actually, I'm going to start out, I'm going to create a sort of a little background look, and then we'll create the extruded text on top. And what I always like to do, I was never really a big fan of this effect until I actually started using it inside of BCC, and it's inside of Art Looks, and it's the cartoon look effect. So if I take cartoon look and I drag and drop it on there, let's step into effects mode again, and I am going to use a preset for this. Again, you see presets are something I go to all the time to use as sort of the base, and then we can have a stepping stone to move forward and work on other things. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use, let's use Smear Softer. That's actually not too bad. Let's just see. I think I'd actually used a different one when I was prepping this. Smooth Cartoon. That's actually the one that I want. I like the sort of the black outline around everything here. Okay. Now I could get in and render this, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this to draft quality here. There we go. Just so this way it's easier for me to drag through, because I don't need to waste time with rendering this. And let's get in and let's add some extruded text over top of this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate back to the effects palette. I'm going to come to my 3D objects, and let's take some BCC extruded text right here. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that inside of the extruded category, a lot of the effects in here, we're actually going to talk about another one coming up in just a second, which is going to be extruded EPS, but a lot of the parameters that you're going to see inside of extruded text transfers over to the other extruded, the other 3D objects effects inside of the BCC effect family. So what we're going to do, again, take extruded text. Let's just drag it down here and drop it onto our shot. You'll see I'm actually prompted right away. Okay, Kev, you need to click launch the text window to open the text window and start entering text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that. Now, anyone that's familiar with almost any Boris Effects product, even RED, Graffiti, is going to be familiar with this window, the text window. Even people coming from Final Cut 7 are familiar with the with a Boris effect that we had in there for titling. And what we're going to do is we're just going to call this Top Chef. Okay. Now, inside of the text window, we of course have complete flexibility over leading, kerning, things like that. We can justify things. We can adjust tracking, baseline, and all that type of stuff. So if I needed to get in and make some, minor tweaks to the kerning in between the text, what I can do is simply hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and you can see that I can just move things over a little bit just to sort of get all my typography exactly the way that I want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to center this text up here. Let's just center it up. And I'm going to set the leading to be something like, I don't know, about -45, I think. Okay. And what I'm going to do is simply say apply. Now, as soon as I do, you're going to see I now have, well, let's be honest, it's some really ugly gray text that we're going to be able to get in and alter. But what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the text and what's going on here. Now let's just zoom in on my text a little bit here. And I'm going to put this in the best quality just so that we can see what's going on. Okay. Now for me, extrusion and the bevel is normally the first thing that I get in and adjust. And you'll see it's kind of appropriate that it's really one of the first categories under the general controls in the render. Now, why would you ever need to get in and adjust the render settings? Well, let's say you had some extruded text that, the edges weren't as smooth as you wanted them to be. Okay, what you could do inside of render is you could actually get in and bump the polygon count up. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lower it to be about 5, just to give you sort of an example. And you can see that what was smooth before is not smooth anymore. I'm just going to set that back to be the default, which is 25, because that's pretty smooth. But for me, you'll see actually what I also like in this category is we can actually have the effect follow the Avid draft quality, which is actually very handy. It's on by default, so you don't even need to think about it. But what I want to do is inside extrusion, I'm going to set the bevel amount to be something pretty low, like 0.1. There we go. Now you can see that in between the C and the H, we need to get a little more space in between the O and the P. So let me just quickly adjust that. So the O and the P, we'll just adjust that a little bit. And the C and the H. Okay, just say apply. There we go, much better, okay? And let's see, do I want to, maybe I'll just adjust the extrusion just a little bit more, just to make it a little bit, deeper. Give it an extrusion of about 10, okay? Now, one thing that I always tell people, and I'm just gonna zoom back a little bit, is that, right now the text doesn't fill the window. What a lot of people do is they'll start jumping back and forth into the text windows to start making adjustments to things like the scaling of the text and that type of thing. Now, for me, I don't normally work like that. Once I get in and I have the text set and looking the way that I like to do all my adjustments outside of the actual text window. We can actually do that. I'm going to skip down a little bit here because right down here at the bottom, towards the bottom, we have a category called appropriately enough transformations. If I scroll that down, we of course have the ability to come in and adjust the master scale. So I can actually just adjust the master scale and make everything much larger. And of course now it's, getting cut off at the top of the window here. That's okay because of course I can adjust the position as well. There we go. Very cool. Okay. And of course, if we wanted to, we could get in and adjust rotation as well. Now what I'm going to do, just because for the purposes of what we're doing, I'm just going to bump the quality down a little bit just so I get a little bit more responsive with the rotation here. There we go. Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about actually getting in and applying a material to the front of this text. Now, of course, we do have a category for material. What I'm going to do is just twirl up my transformations. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that we actually have the ability to get in and add 4 different materials to this text. We can add a material to the front, to the extrusion, to the back, and even to the bevel. Now, for the purposes of what I'm doing, I'm only going to apply 1 texture to everything. But to get in and adjust that, it's actually right here, material count. I control that down. You'll see I can have 1, same on all sides, 2 back and front, or bevels and sides, 3 back front, bevel and side. So back and front will be the same and bevel and side will be separate. Or I can have them all split, all 4 different ones. Now, like I said, for me, I'm going to stick with the same on all sides. And let's take a look at our front material. Now, of course, we have the ability to get in and add a texture if we wanted to. You'll see we've got a ton of textures to choose from. In most cases, one that I like to use all the time is always the brush metal ones. Those for me are always the ones that really stand out. And what we also have the ability to do is get in and adjust texture, or the alpha of the texture as well. We can also adjust the strength of it, just like such. And what we can also do is just get in if we wanted to. I'm just going to turn this off here. And we could even add our own color in here. So let's say I wanted this to be, I don't know, blue. Probably not that really dark shade of blue, but I could just simply say, let's make this blue, and there we go. Now we also have the ability to get in and add presets, material presets. Now we have some in here, very cool. And the one I always like to actually go to show this off is blue plastic, because I like the way that we have the light here with the reflection. You'll see that I can actually come right over top of the light source here, and I could adjust it here if I wanted to. There we go. I can bring it, let's just bring it right back up here. There we go. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay. And you can see, very responsive. Just basically take it, drag it where you want, and it will update. Now I'm just going to undo that just to put it back where it was. Okay. And let's get in and, well, you know what? I'm actually kind of happy with the way that that looks. Okay. Now, one thing I do want to point out as well is that there's also an effect in here called layer deformer. Now, a layer deformer would be something that you would apply to a layer of video, but like I said, a lot of these parameters transfer over from one category to another, and we do have all of the layer transformer elements or parameters right down here at the bottom. Okay. Now, again, like I said, we're talking about setting all this up in your NLE, and let me just actually bend this. There we go. Very cool. Okay. And let's just say that hypothetically I was, happy with this look. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually, I'm going to change the color just to change it up a bit. Let's make it like green. Why not? Sure, green. Okay, that's pretty cool. We're going to stick with the green color. What we're going to do is, again, we're going to save this look out. Okay, so let's do that. Let's come up to the top here to our presets. I'm going to say save. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that if I had actually gotten in and animated any of these parameters, they don't transfer over into Resolve. So keep that in mind. You can get in and create all the looks that you want, but as far as animation goes, what you animate inside of Media Composer or Premiere or anything like that is not going to transfer over into Resolve. All that animation would need to be redone inside of Resolve. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to save this out. Let's just say save. I'm going to come, of course, back to the desktop to my extruded text. We're going to call this Top Chef. Okay, and let's save this out. And I'm going to come back to my cartoon look here. And again, exactly the same thing. We'll save it. Now, of course, this was just a preset that I could just apply, but we'll just do it like this just for the sake of being consistent here. And we'll call this cartoon look. Okay. And let's come back into Resolve now. What we're going to do is just Command Tab back into Resolve. And you'll see actually that while we were in there, the render happened in the background. So there's our element. Now I shouldn't actually hit play because I don't want to clog the pipeline there, but there's that look we created. So let's get in, let's do our extruded text now. So here's our extruded text element. Pretty much exactly the way we had it inside of Media Composer or Premiere if we happen to be using Premiere. Now, to apply the cartoon look, very simple, very straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to come back into the color tab. I'm going to come back up to the art section. It's cartoon look, it's right here. Let's drag and drop it. Okay. There we go. And of course, again, exactly like we did before, let's load it up. Come back to the desktop. Let's come into our extruded text, and we're going to take our cartoon look, and there we go. Okay, cartoon look looking exactly the way that we had it. Again, this will start rendering in the background. I'm just going to click through just for the purposes of seeing it. But let's talk about getting in and creating the 3D text, because this works a little bit differently. Because what a lot of people think that you would do is you would basically take the effect, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add another node here. Okay. What most people think that you would do is you would take your extruded text and you would apply it to another node right above, just like that. But the problem is that's not exactly how things work inside of Resolve. Okay. What we need to do is we need to actually set something up a little bit differently for this effect. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that node. Okay. And let's come back to our edit, and we're going to add a layer above our fruit. I'm just going to grab a color solid. We'll just do black here. And I'm going to make it a compound clip. Okay. Just call this extruded text. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to come back to our color tab. And of course, I'm going to take extruded text and we're going to apply it to this compound clip. Now, once I apply it, it's of course, again, you see the great thing with all of the effects inside of BCC is that they really function pretty much exactly the same as they do from host to host, obviously with a few minor variations in there, but more or less the same thing. Now, what we want to do here is we want to, of course, load a preset. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to the desktop. We're going to come into extruded text. I'm going to choose that. Nope, not the cartoon look, because it'll give me an error if I do that. The Top Chef look, I'm simply going to say open. We'll give Resolve a second here to open that up. And we'll see if it'll open that. Hopefully it will. If it doesn't, we can easily just rebuild it. Well, look at that. Let's try that one more time. And if it doesn't, I'll just quickly rebuild it here. But what should happen is that it should actually... That's okay. What we can do is I can actually just do this exactly the way that we had it before. Top Chef. Okay. We're going to say apply. What we're going to do is, there we go. Look at that. As soon as I type it in, there it appears. So there we go. So we actually had to get in and type the text in. So basically what had happened is that everything else had transferred over except the actual text itself. So all the parameters transfer over, text you need to input yourself. Okay. Not a big deal here. Again, I just need to remember -45 for the leading. There we go. We're going to apply that. And we now have our Top Chef look. So people think, okay, awesome, Kev, you know what we're going to do? We're going to jump back into our edit, and we now have our Top Chef text over a black background. So what is happening? Well, what we need to do in this case is we actually need to get in and we need to tell Resolve that we want to actually take this element and key it over top of something. And we can actually do that very easily. It actually takes 2 steps to do it. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to right-click on the actual node itself, and I'm going to say, use OFX alpha. Okay. Now, as soon as I do, you're going to notice the color change from black to be gray. Basically, the gray represents transparent. Now, most people think, okay, great, let's jump back into the edit. Oh, well, I don't know, it's still black, it's not gray. Well, that's okay. What we need to do is we need to actually tell Resolve that we want to send that alpha that we just created to the alpha output. So all I'm going to do is simply right-click, and we're going to add an alpha output that's going to appear right here. And all I'm going to do is take that alpha channel, drag and drop it to attach it just like that. And now we have our text over top of our fruit background. Let's give it a second update here. There we go. Very cool. And of course, now I could get in and I could take my text, I could rotate it, and you'll see actually, if I come back here, is that I even saved that with the layer deformer on it. So if I come all the way down here, and what we could do is we could just close all these up just to make our life easier here. So I don't need all these materials, transformations, path, letter transformations. You see we have just an absolute ton of parameters inside of the extruded text effect, which is great. Okay, and you can see there's jitter and there's bend, taper, twist right now set to be 125. I could just set that back to 0 to untwist it just like that. And you see we have basically the same great look that we had inside of Media Composer here. Let's actually just take a look at it here. Obviously minus the bended text inside of Resolve. Okay, so let's move on. And let's talk about another interesting situation that I've sort of seen editors get into. And that's working with an extruded EPS. Okay? And again, extruded EPS is going to work much the same as extruded text did. So let's just close the effects editor here. And what I'm going to do is, because I work on a Mac, I don't have that sort of the containers, you know, so if I stick Resolve in behind, I always find it a little bit hard to see. Okay? So let's just close lesson 2. We're going to come into lesson 3. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in, and what I probably should have done is I just ruined the surprise. This is sort of the look that we're going to create. Now, this is a look that I created with an EPS file. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a couple different situations and how we can work with EPS files. And what I'm going to do is I just hit out of Media Composer, and this is the EPS element that we were given. Client says, hey, Kev, you know, all I have is, you know, this, you know, black, you know, ribbon with Your Cause Awareness Month on it. We're going to need to change this up, okay? So the first thing that they might want you to do is to just basically take this, and let's just say we're going to go with one solid color. We're going to go with, I don't know, let's go with yellow, okay? Now I used obviously multicolors, and I'll show you how we can quickly adjust this in just a second. I'm going to come back into Media Composer. Let's take our clip, drop it in, okay? Again, a new video layer, Command and Y, okay? And again, Command and 8 to call up the effects palette. And of course, instead of using extruded text, we're going to use extruded EPS. Now, like I had mentioned before, you'll see that, you know, much like I said with the 3D objects, what it does with one, it does with a lot of them in here. You'll see that no external media file has been selected, so please use the external file button to choose an external source. Basically, that's extruded EPS's way of saying, much like in text, you need to enter some information for me to use or to work with, okay? So what we're going to do again is we're going to step into effects mode, and let's tell extruded EPS what the element is that we want to use. And now you might think, okay, well, where do we go to do that? Well, it's actually right here, external file, right below our render and our lights and our aspect ratio. It's right here, external file. So all it basically wants to know is, where is this element? And the element is located right on my desktop inside of the extruded EPS folder. I've called it Your Cause EPS, and I'm simply going to say open. Now, as soon as I open it, your first thought is, well, Kev, where is it? It's a little bit hard to see. Well, what's important to keep in mind is that if I hide Media Composer again, is the element's black. It's black, a black logo with black text in behind it. So, of course, it's going to be a little bit hard to see. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, Kev, you know what I should probably do? I should go into Illustrator and fix this. That would be the case if you wanted to have different colors on different elements inside of this logo, and I'll show you that in just a second. But I don't want to do that. I just want to have one logo color. Let's just say yellow is going to be the color. So what I can actually do is, inside of the effect itself, I can actually tell the extruded EPS effect that I don't want to keep the EPS color. I want to use a different color, and you'll see it immediately switches to gray, because what happens is, as soon as I deselect keep EPS color, it gives me the diffuse color, which I said I was going to use yellow. Now I'm just picking yellow because it's going to stand out a lot from the background. There we go. Okay, so let's take this and let's tweak this a little bit to put it sort of on the left-hand side over here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to, again, you know, everyone knows my thing with extrusions. Let's put the extrusion, I'm going to put it a little bit low. I'm going to put it at about 3, but it's that bevel. That bevel, I always like it at about, you know, let's actually put it, I put it at 0.01. Let's just put it at 0.1. We'll give it a bit of a bevel. Now, again, because we're not in text, I don't have that option to be jumping up into the text window. I don't have a choice but to come down and do transformations right down here, okay? But you'll see that once you sort of start to get the hang of how things work, and let's adjust its position, it's very easy to get in and set this up, okay? Now, what's important to keep in mind is, again, I'm not looking at this at its best quality, so let me go to the best quality. And what I'm also going to do is just zoom in a little bit here, because this is actually a perfect example of what we were talking about before. That O is not exactly the smoothest circle there. Neither is the U, and really all of these letters are not exactly smooth. This is not too bad, but you can see it's a bit jaggy on the inside, so I want to adjust that. No problem. Again, exactly where it was in extruded text. We're going to come right back up to render. Let's just set the polygon count to be something, you know, I'll just put it at 50 because I got a pretty powerful system here, and there we go. That's looking much better. If I zoom back now, that's looking a heck of a lot better. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that as I'm moving these elements around the frame, you'll see that I can actually take its position XY, and I can actually move it wherever I need it to go. The lights aren't moving. So any lights that are impacting this element are going to stay where they are, and it's going to alter the way that it looks. Now, you'll also see that right now, in its position, you'll see that I can actually see the extrusion on the A. If I was to take this element and stick it on the other side, I would actually see the extrusion on the A on the other side. So this is not just, you know, sort of faux 3D. This is actually really being updated in 3D space. So again, I'm just going to take this. I'm just going to position it right about, you know, right about here. And again, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to come up to our presets. We'll save this out. Come back to the desktop. This is extruded EPS. We're going to call this, I'll call it your cause. We'll say save. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show this to you in Resolve, and then I'm going to show you how we can quickly just change the color of this in Illustrator and have it, we'll basically just re-import it into the extruded EPS effect to change the color of this to be whatever we want, which I sort of teased a little bit off the top of this. So again, back into Resolve. Okay. You'll see again, as soon as I switched over, we now have this element that's been rendered, ready to go. So if I had animated this, if I had it move in or anything like that, we'd be all set to go. But what I want to do is some extruded EPS. Okay. Now, I'm just trying to remember here. I'm pretty sure that we have to do the same process for extruded EPS. So let's just do that. Let us make a new compound clip. We'll just say create. Come to the color. Let's take our extruded EPS. Okay. Of course, I'm going to be prompted with the exact same window. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load the preset. Okay. Back to the desktop, back to extruded EPS, back to my cause. Again, this is a static preset. Okay. Now, of course, it's not going to do anything because I haven't told it what the source is. Okay. Now the source, let's just come over here and I just got to, you all can't see this, but I just have to move my GoToWebinar screen here. There we go. And let's use our external file, which is, of course, my your cause EPS. I'm simply going to say open, and there we go. Now, of course, again, much like we've done before, let's add an OFX alpha output. Now, I might not even need to do that with this effect. That might be unique to only extruded text, but let's just see here. We'll find out in about 2 seconds here. I probably can just apply it to the actual clip, which is good. So let's do that. Okay. Let's actually come back to edit. We're just going to apply it right to the clip. Okay, extruded EPS. Okay, once it applies, give it a second here. There we go. Let us come into our preset. Again, let's load the preset. Let's come back to our desktop. Okay. And let's go to our external folder. Let's go to your cause, say open. Now see, that should have updated it when I did it the other way. When I had it the way I had it before, because basically the layout works exactly the same. Let's just undo this here. There we go. Okay. But basically what we would have done is we would have, let's come back into the color wheel here. There we go. Okay. There we go. Perfect. I just didn't catch when I clicked it before, but there we go. So as you can see, works exactly the same as extruded text does. And we have our element here. Now, of course, it's going to start to render again, like I said. So as you can see, we're basically now all set to go in our timeline here. Very cool. So this is my Your Cause Awareness Month. Now, like I said before, if I wanted to get in and adjust this and change the color, all I would need to do is with this element, I could simply right-click on it, say Open with Adobe Illustrator. And like I said, the element is black, okay? So what we're going to do is we're just going to change the color inside of Illustrator, because sometimes you have that flexibility. And you might want to have different elements as different colors. And what I want to show you is that inside the effect itself, I'm just going to select this. And let's just pick, I don't know, why not green? Sure. And let's just pick for this one here, let's pick, sure, how about sort of this aqua blue? Okay, and I'm just going to save this as something different, just so that we'll call it Your Cause 2. Okay. Just to show you that if you're bringing in a complex logo, let's just come back in a Media Composer here. What I can do now is just simply say, let's choose a different external file. We're going to use Your Cause 2. And what's important is you're saying, well, Kev, nothing has updated. Well, what's important to keep in mind is that we don't want to use the color of the effect. We want to use our own color. So there we go. So there's my Your Cause Awareness Month. Let's go back into Resolve. Let's do the exact same thing here. Let's go to External File. Let's go to Your Cause 2. Simply say Open. Let's actually come down here to my Materials, and we want to keep that EPS color the same, just like that. So you see that you can get in using extruded EPS and create very complex, logos that you can extrude. So maybe it's a team logo that you have for something, it could really be anything. And you can actually get in and use the power of extruded EPS inside of Resolve to create very cool 3D looking elements. And again, what's important to keep in mind, and I'm just going to do this again here, I'm just going to remove the alpha, and we're going to remove the alpha output here, is that when you apply it, the steps to get extruded text, or in this case, extruded EPS to appear, is to basically right-click on your node. You want to use the OFX alpha. So you want to do that to the clip. You'll see it turn gray, so we know that that's transparent. You want to right-click and then say, Add Alpha Output to add it here. And then we're basically going to take this. Now, hold on a second. My mouse has got a little bit of hair on the bottom here. There we go. We're going to take our alpha and attach it to that. And as soon as we do, boom, it appears in our timeline, ready to go. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about something a little bit different now. Let's just close the effects editor. Again, I need to just quit out of Illustrator and make sure I got nothing sort of hanging around in the background here. There we go, just to make it a lot easier. Let's talk about creating a lower third, okay? Now to do that, we're actually gonna switch. We're gonna stop talking about BCC 9 for a while, and we're gonna talk about RED. Now, I say RED, but for a lot of my Media Composer friends out there, you might already have access, if you picked up Media Composer in version 7, to Avid Effects. Now, what I'm showing you works exactly the same for Avid Effects inside of Media Composer, but obviously inside of Resolve, you're going to need to use the RED 5.5 Resolve plugin, but everything that I show you will transfer from Avid Effects to RED 5.5 for Resolve. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's just come in and we're just going to create a very basic lower third. Nothing too crazy. We have our, general architect / happy man here, and we're just going to give him a lower third. Okay. Now, one thing that I really like about using RED is that we can get in and create some animation with RED that will transfer over into Resolve. Now, why would it transfer over inside of RED and not transfer over inside of BCC? Well, what's important to keep in mind about RED is, or Avid Effects I could be talking about, but I'll just for the purposes of moving on, I'm going to talk about it as RED. Is that RED is a standalone application. Even though it is an effect that I'm applying in my timeline, it's still opening another application. So we can get in and we can create animation inside of RED that will transfer from Media Composer to Premiere to Resolve to any other host application that supports RED. So let me show you what I mean by this. What we're going to do is we're going to come back to the effects palette, and I'm going to come down here to Boris RED for Avid. And I'm just going to take, in this case, I could take the titler. I'm just going to take the real-time filter here. Okay, I'm just going to drag and drop and apply it. Nothing has appeared to happen. Let's step into effects mode and let's launch the user interface. Okay, So we're now in the user interface, and what we want to do is we just want to create the absolute most basic of lower thirds. Nothing too complex for the purposes of me showing this to you, okay? Now what I'm going to do inside my project settings is just make sure my hold parameter values is set, and let's create this lower third, okay? What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to add a color solid here, okay? So there's our color solid, and let us, before I do that, let's just turn both of these off. I'm just going to delete video 2. Turn video 1 back on. There we go. Okay. And let us take our color solid, and I'm going to make it, I don't know, what color do you think would go well there? Maybe like a blue. This would be good for sort of a background bar that we're going to create. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're just going to mask this. Okay. Let me just adjust the top. We'll sort of bring it down to about, I don't know, to about there. Bring the bottom up a little bit, sort of to about there. And what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the right softness. Okay. Now I'm probably going to bring this over a bit because his name is not going to be that big. Of course, I can get in and tweak this a little bit after the fact. Now, what I should have done here was I should have made sure I was at the starting frame here. Okay, let's bring that back. There we go. Okay, so there's sort of a lower third bar, you know, sort of the common bar that you're going to create when you're creating your lower third. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some new, just vector text. Now, you remember I talked about this before when we were talking about extruded text. That text window, very common across all of the Boris product line. Again, no different in RED 5. Here is our text window. Now, this guy's name is going to be Jim Jimerson, just because I can't think of a better name for him. And he's going to be an all-around, I don't know if there's a hyphen, but there is one now, and he's an all-around nice guy. Okay. And of course, inside of the text window, we'll just capitalize this, why not? Okay. We have the ability to get in and tweak things very differently. So for example, actually, let me take this and let's left justify our text first. There we go. And you can see it's appeared now inside of my canvas here. And at any point, what I can do is take it and just reposition it where I want it to go. So for example, here, just so I could see it a little bit better. Okay. So let's just choose a bit of a better font. We got Arial here. I wonder, you know, maybe I'll choose, you know what, I think I'll actually stick with Arial because I want to adjust this. I can actually bold. You'll see that I can get in and adjust different lines of text independently of each other. And what we're going to do here as well is I'm going to add a shadow to this. So let's do that. Okay. Add a shadow. Okay. And we'll put the distance at something like, I don't know, 5, put the opacity at like 100, and we'll put the softness at like 2, okay? So we've created a very basic lower third, okay? Now you'll see that as I drag through, the shadow disappears just for the purposes of previewing, and that's fine. If I wanted to get in and actually have this a little bit more responsive, I can actually come in and adjust the quality to be full, quarter, or half, and even adjust the quality to be high or draft quality. So that's actually very good. You know, obviously based on the system you're using, based on the type of footage that you're trying to work with. It's a great way to get in and make RED as responsive as you might need it, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm just going to, you know what, I'm just going to create a basic fade up on this text here. So let's do that. What I think I'll actually do is I'm going to have my color solid slide in. So I think I'm going to have it actually start about here. Okay, so let's just have it start about here, about 15 frames in, okay? And what we're going to do is at about, I think I'm only going to have the move be about 15 frames. So let's adjust our transformations here, our position, and we're going to add a keyframe right there. It's actually not the Y position, it's actually the X position that we want to adjust. Okay, and let's do this. Okay. And we'll come back here, and we're just going to slide this right off, just like that. And what we're going to do is the Jim Jimerson is actually going to fade in. Okay, so we're just going to have that slide in, maybe about halfway through. We'll sort of have our, we'll have our text appear. Okay. Actually, you know what? Why don't we do this? Just for the sake of what we're doing, I'm just going to do it as a fade up here. Okay. Let's come down to opacity. Just set the opacity down to be nothing. There we go. So what we'll do is we'll have the opacity fade in here. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is at about the halfway point, actually, maybe we'll have the bar fade up and then we'll have our Jim Jimerson fade up here, just to change things up a little bit here. Okay. Position, we want to set the opacity here to be linear. And I think that's where we're going to have it start to fade up right there. Okay. And to about there, have it fade up. Okay. So nothing too fancy. Okay. We can come back. I'm just going to drag through. I'm not going to play this. Just so that the shot will start. We'll have one fade up, and then we'll have the other one fade up here. There we go. Okay. Now, of course, what I can do at this point is I could simply say apply, and this is going to be applied to my timeline. There we go. But what I need to do is I need to get in and actually export this out to the desktop so that we can open it in Resolve and apply it to whatever shot we might want to do. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that if I come back into Red 5 here, is that I could get in and change this text to be anything that I wanted it to be. You know, I do have my text window right here, Jim Jimerson, so I could change that to actually be my own name, Kevin P. McAuliffe. Apparently, I've taken a different type of job here. Okay, but what we want to do now is instead of just applying this to stick it on our Media Composer timeline or our Premiere timeline, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a save, and I'm going to save this project copy as, and we're going to save it to the desktop into the red lower third. And I'm going to call this lower third. Okay. And I'm simply going to say save. Okay. So I've gone through, I've created a whole bunch of different, lower thirds. And what I've done is I've saved them all out. Let's say we've got 20 of them. I've saved them all out. What I should actually do is I'm just going to call this by my own name here. Let's do this. Kevin P. Whoops. Let's make sure I'm doing this right here because I think this is actually a very cool thing to show. Okay. And let me just change this here. Okay, come back in here. We'll launch the user interface. And now Boris Effects is a nice, all-around nice guy. Okay, and let's save this one as, save project copy as. Okay, again, exactly the same thing, except this time we're calling it Boris Effects. Okay. Now, like I said, we're going to assume that for argument's sake, we have 20 of these, okay, because we've created all these lower thirds inside of Media Composer or Premiere to work with inside of Resolve. So let's inside of Resolve, we're going to come back to the Edit tab. I'm going to come to my lower third here. Where's my mouse here? Hold on a second here. Mouse, of course, always gives you problems when you don't want it to. There we go. Perfect. Here's our lower third, okay? Now, a little bit different than how we did with BCC is if I come back into my effects panel here, what we want to do is we want to take my red effect. Now, the technique I'm showing you with red is going to work very similar inside of graffiti. Obviously, graffiti is specifically, designed to do titles. It's a great, a great entry-level titling, I'll say application and plugin that you can use inside of different host applications, much like Red. You see with Red, very different. We don't have all these parameters, just simply to launch the user interface. But guess what? Exactly the same user interface as I just had. So what I should be able to do here is to simply come up to the file, say open project. Let's go back to the desktop here. Let's come into my lower third. Let's come into my lower third here, Kevin P. McAuliffe. And guess what? There I am as the all-around nice guy. What we're going to do is simply say apply. And guess what? I'm still an all-around nice guy that's actually going to fade in exactly the way that I had built this animation. Oh, but you know what? We actually have another shot now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here. Let's actually just grab a different shot here. It doesn't even really matter which shot it is here. Let's just grab, we'll just grab the shot of the woman here. Okay. Let's take that. Let's come to color. Let's come back to red. Except she is going to be Boris Effects now. So all we're going to do is launch red. Again, open project. Right back to the same folder, to the Boris Effects lower third. Guess what? Boris Effects is still the all-around nice guy. But guess what? We now can get in and literally drag and drop, for the most part, all of these effects on top of any shot we might need them on. And literally, they're ready to render and go. Boom, there we go. Just like that. Very quick and very easy. Okay, so let's wrap things up here. And I want to show you one last thing. And that's something else that you're going to be doing a lot of, especially if you work on episodic television, and that's creating credit scrolls, pardon me, because we obviously want to have them scroll up the screen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to cancel out here. And I'm just going to remove that effect, because we're just going to start it again right from the beginning. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, Kev, I use Resolve, and I know that inside of Resolve, I actually do have the ability to do a title scroll. But the difference is that you might want to get in and start adding complex things like, you know, extruded logos and things like that. And guess what? Using Red, you have the ability to do all of that. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to hide resolve here for a second, and I'm going to create a crawl on this shot here. Now, this shot is pretty quick, 5 seconds. And we're going to create a pretty long crawl, okay? So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to come right back to Red. It's going to be a long crawl, but it's actually going to be quite simple in how I create it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to launch the user interface. Now, of course, again, much like I've done before, I'm going to just create a very basic vector text, okay, by simply clicking on the vector text button, just like that. And inside of our text window, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in, you know, let's type in who did this role, okay, who did this role, okay, and under that, it's going to be Bob. Okay, so basically this is going to be our crawl, and we're just going to put different names in here just so we can see what's going on. Okay. Okay, I messed that one up there, but that's okay. Okay, we'll do one more, okay, just like such, and you'll see that it just appears right dead in the middle of the screen. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually, first of all, I'm going to center this up, okay? Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start changing these names. So we got Bob, we got Sally, we got Kevin, just to change this up just so that we can see this, okay? Jim, Eric, Joe, and I don't know why the name Felix hopped into my head, but Felix, there we go. So these are all the people that did these roles. Now you can see that the text disappears right out of the canvas, but that's no problem because we can obviously adjust this, even though technically the frame size is still the frame size that's determined by Media Composer. You'll see that the text extends out. And we're going to create a basic animation for this. Now again, I'm just going to start this back at the beginning. There we go. Okay. And what I'm going to do, though, I know you're thinking, well, Kev, I could do that in Resolve. Why would I need to do that in Red? Well, here's what we're going to do, okay? So first of all, we're going to add a shadow, much like I had done before, okay? Shadow on. Again, distance is going to be 2. Opacity is going to be 100. And the softness is going to be, I don't know, 3, okay? So you can see it stands out now much better, okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a logo in here. I'm actually going to, let's just say hypothetically, you know, Joe is no longer with us anymore, okay? And I want to put that little bow that I'd had beside Joe, or the bow that I had sort of for our Your Cause Here extruded EPS example. We're going to take that and we're going to apply it here. Now I can just import an EPS file. It's going to ask me where the EPS file is. Now, I actually believe that I have this on the desktop inside of my credit crawl here. There we go, perfect. So as you can see, it's basically just the logo only, okay? So I'm going to import that. And why don't we take the color, and we'll make the color something different, okay? Now to do that, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a new color. Let's make it that red color. Okay. We're going to say okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this logo as a mask, just like that, okay? And we're just going to put this over here. Let's actually apply this to the right thing here. Okay, there we go. So this way, when I move the layer, everything moves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double this up, and we're going to put one on either side of Joe. Now, of course, I could get in. I could add the shadow, much like I did here. And I'm not going to do that, though, just for the purposes of time. I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm going to put this on the other side. I'm not going to be too fancy with this. Okay. So you can see now I have a few layers going on inside of Red, but what I really need to do is I really just need one layer that I can take and animate, you know, my whole title roll with, or my title scroll. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to stick all of these into a 3D container. So all I'm going to do is basically select the layers, and I'm just going to add them to this container here. You can see that it's taken them and it's dropped them inside this 3D container. So all I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to set this up right about here. Okay. What I should have done here is let's just select this here. There we go. And we're going to put it right about there. That's looking good. Position. We'll do this linear. Okay. And all we're going to do now is down at the very end, inside, of course, of transformations, we're going to adjust our Y position here. Adjust it the right way here. I don't want it to go too crazy. I want it just to disappear from the screen like such. Okay. And you can see that I've basically done, now this is obviously way too far over what I should have done here. Let's just actually undo what I just did. Okay. I actually want to make sure that those things are visible here. There we go. Okay. So let's reposition this just so that I've got my bows visible. That's actually better. We'll keep it inside safe. There we go. Okay. And of course we want to have these just as a linear move. And let's just reposition this now. Perfect. Okay. So here's our scroll. Okay. There's my bows. Okay. And you can see, there we go. There's our move. Okay. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, Kev, 5 seconds is pretty short. Okay. So what happens if I need to make this longer? Do I got to go back into red? Do I need to make adjustments? Well, you don't need to do that, because what's important to keep in mind is that the project, and what I should actually do here is I should step in and save this project out here, because that was sort of the whole point of this. Let's just do a save, again, to the desktop, come into credit crawl. We're going to call this our crawl. Okay. And I'll come into resolve here, and we'll take our timeline number 5. I'm just going to stick my dude, actually not from the timeline, I'm going to take him from the media pool here. I'm just going to take my dude here, okay, which is basically what I had created inside of Media Composer, or it could be a Premiere again. Okay, we're just going to launch the UI. We're going to open a project. Again, you see the process is very similar and very simple, okay? And here's my crawl. Boom, done, okay? You'll see I can click through. There's all my elements, because remember, those are just saved and are referenced on my computer. And I'm simply going to say apply. As soon as I do, there's the crawl. But again, like I said, it's too fast. 5 seconds is too long. Well, that's okay. Because the way RED works is when I take an animation and I apply it to a clip, that RED animation is going to take on the parameters or the length of that clip. So for example, I'm going to take these two, and I'm not going to apply it to one or the other. I'm going to compound these. We'll call this credit crawl. And what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to come back into my color tab. I'm going to take red. I'm going to apply it. We're going to launch the UI. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that crawl. And what's going to happen now is that crawl is now going to be extended over the entire length of these two shots. So essentially what we've just done now is a fit to fill on this crawl. So you can get in and tweak these however you need. So if I needed to have, you know, half the length, twice the length, 2/3 the length, doesn't matter. It's not going to impact the animation that I did on the crawl. That crawl is now going to be extended to fit to fill all of the shots that it happens to be applied to.